To have Royce Mullins telling us the story of the Pound Gap Massacre, the Red Fox story. Where you at, Royce?
Right here.
Welcome to the stage, Royce Mullins.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if there's 200 or 25, so we're fine. So I'm going to tell the story, and I know most of you have heard the story anyway. But it's always good to remember it. Come on now, Marley. Test, test, test. Is that okay? All right, so we're going to tell it, and there's a lot of versions, more than one, of what happened that transpired up on the mountain at the Killing Rock. I've seen 3 or 4 different versions of it, but my version, I believe, is the true version because it's an eyewitness account. I'm telling the story that the Fleming boys, it's their story. It's not someone else's story, but the actual participants in the killing and what happened in Boggs, West Virginia at the shootout, it's their story. Now, my uncle by marriage was Winfred Collins. His great uncles were Heenan and Cal Fleming. His grandfather, John Fleming, was Heenan and Cal's brother. Now, what I'm telling you is what Heenan and Cal told their brother what happened at the Killing Rock. So it's an eyewitness account and their version. So I take that to be the real version. Now, there was bad blood between Doc Taylor and Ira Mullins. Ira was a big moonshiner, and when Doc Taylor had been appointed deputy sheriff or marshal, deputy marshal in Wise County, he had vowed to cut out all the moonshining around the area. And Ira Mullins was high on his list. And about a year prior to the shootout, or the killing, the massacre up on the mountain, Ira had tried to take a load of liquor through Wise. At that time they called it Gladeville. He tried to take a load of liquor through there, and they apprehended him and had a big shootout. Doc Taylor and some of his men, Ira had a bunch of men, and there was a big shootout up in Gladeville. Several were hurt and injured, and the driver was actually killed. But Ira got away. And more than likely, Ira was crippled. He was paralyzed from the waist down. It could have been from that shootout at Wise. I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard it say that that's how he was crippled in that shootout at Wise a year prior to the massacre up here on the mountain. So there was bad blood. Doc Taylor didn't like Ira, and Ira didn't like Doc Taylor. Another thing that added to it was that there had been a dispute over land in Kentucky. Henry Vanover had land that he said was squatting on, that he was living on it, and it was his property. And so they've been going to court over that to get that settled. And there was bad blood between Henry Vanover and Ira Mullins, and Henry was killed. He was murdered, and many say that Ira was involved in that killing of Henry Vanover. Now the twist to it is that Heenan Fleming was married to Henry Vanover's daughter. So Henry would have been his father-in-law. So there was bad blood between Heenan and Ira Mullins. So that kind of shows how events transpired on the mountain that day. Now my great-grandmother, Liddy Haddon, was 19 years old. On the 14th day of May, 1892, she was hoeing corn at Haddonfield. Anybody know where Haddonfield is located? Yeah. It's located out in the south of the mountain. You go out the foot of the mountain, turn right-handed, and go about 1.5 miles, and you're in Haddonfield. She was hoeing corn in Haddonfield about 1 o'clock in the day. And she said all of a sudden there was a bunch of shots rang out on the mountain. You just hear it from Haddonfield. It's just about as a crow flies, probably a mile or less than a mile to the Killing Rock from Haddonfield. And she said a bunch of shots rang out up on the mountain. And she said, what in the world's going on up on the mountain? Well, that's when the Killing Rock Massacre was taking place. Now, most of the stories say that there were only 3 involved: Doc Taylor, Cal, and Heenan. Heenan says he was never at the actual massacre. He said that he had taken the horses down the trail about 1/4 mile because they were afraid that they would whinny or neigh or give away their ambush sites. So he had taken the horses 1/4 mile down the trail so that their ambush site wouldn't be given away. At the killing was Doc Taylor, Cal was there, Bad Henry Adams, and they said that there was a swindle man from Dixon County that was involved. Now, don't know the name of the man. His grandpa said they never said his name, but they said there was a swindle involved. So there was 4 people involved in the killing. And as they came down the trail, they were bringing a load of liquor over from Kentucky and going to sell it over at Wise, or over in Wise, wherever they were taking it. And the people that were bringing it, there was Wilson Mullins. He was lead. There was a horse. They had the liquor in a wagon, and Ira he was riding in the back of the wagon. He was crippled. He couldn't walk, so he was in the back of the wagon, laying on a bunch of hay, and the liquor was underneath the hay. 2 horses were drawing the wagon. Wilson was leading the wagon in front. He was on foot. Ira's wife Lorenza and John Chappell were in the front of the wagon. John Chappell was driving the wagon, and Lorenza was sitting beside him, Ira in the back. Behind them walking was John Harrison Mullins, who was the 14-year-old son of Ira and Lorenza, and his friend Greenberry Harris, who was 15 years old. And bringing up the rear on horseback was Jane Mullins, and that was Wilson's wife. Well, if you've ever been to the Killing Rock and seen it, it's a perfect ambush site. Okay. I mean, they picked out a great spot to ambush people. And the way the old Fincastle Road came across the mountain, it just kind of winded around. And it was, they could see them coming for a long way. It'd probably take them 15, 20 minutes from the time they topped the mountain to get down where the Killing Rock is, the way the road went, and then being horses drawing the wagon. So they were well prepared. Well, when they got down in front of the rock, they just started shooting. They shot Wilson and killed him. They shot the horses down. They killed Lorenza. They killed John Chappell. They killed Ira. They killed Greenberry Harris. John Harrison took off down the road or down the trail toward Pound, and they shot his suspenders in 2. That's how close he come to being killed. They shot his galluses in 2. But he got away. Cal rose up and hollered at Jane and said, "Jane, you got to get out of here or you're going to get killed." And so she turned around with her horse and rode back over into Kentucky and swore to Cal's voice. She knew him, and she knew that it was Cal Fleming. She said it was Cal Fleming, and more than likely, even though she didn't hear Heenan or anything, she swore it to be Doc Taylor, Cal Fleming, and Heenan Fleming. But Heenan said he was never there, that he was never at the actual shooting. But, you know, there were 5 people laying dead. Wilson Mullins, Lorenza's wife, John Chappell, Greenberry Harris, and Ira. They were dead. And the only one got away was John Harrison and Jane, because Cal told her to run, stood up and hollered at her, told her to get out of there, they were going to kill her. And they threatened to kill Cal. Cal said after he told her to run that they all threatened to kill him because he'd give himself away to run and to get out of there, that they almost killed Cal right there at the side. They threatened to kill him, but they didn't. Well, after the massacre, Heenan and Cal, they hid out from the law for about a year in this area. I think my uncle's grandpa said they scouted out. You know, they were scouting from the law. They were hiding from the law. And he would go and take them food and provisions. Wherever they were staying, he would take them food and provisions while they were trying to stay away from the law. But a year later, they got cornered out here on Mill Creek at a place called the Battleground. Now, they used to fight chickens out there where that shootout took place. And a lot of people think that it was named the Battleground because they fought chickens out there. But that's not how it got its name. It got its name because they cornered Heenan and Cal out there, 22 men. They had a 22-man posse that surrounded them and cornered them out there at the Battleground. Well, they shot their way through that mess and got away, but Heenan was wounded in the leg. And Heenan wanted to give up. He said, "I'm hurt, I can't go, I'm going to have to give up." And Cal was mean. Cal was 22 years old at the killing on the mountain. Heenan was 26. And Cal Fleming was as mean as they come. My uncle said he was meaner than a striped rattlesnake. And he told, or Cal was, and he told Heenan, he said, "I'm not going to let you give up." He said, "If you give up, I'll just kill you where you lay and I'll go on." So Heenan had 2 choices. He could either let Cal kill him, he probably would have, or he could go on with Cal. Well, he decided he better go on with Cal. So they went across Pound River and went into Osborne Gap and stayed all night at a swindle man home. And we always wondered, me and my uncle and I always wondered, was that the same swindle that was involved at the killing on the mountain? Because they did say there was a swindle man that was involved on the killing. Oh, and another thing, Cal told his brother, he swore that he never killed anybody. He said he shot the horses down. He said, I shot the horses, and Doc Taylor and the swindle man and Henry Adams was the one that done the killing. That he never killed any people. That's what he told his brother, but you know, he's telling his brother that, so you don't know. But anyway, he said he never killed anybody. He just shot the horses. But in any event, when they crossed over the river and went into Dixon County that night and stayed, they said they went to Osborne Gap and stayed at a swindle man. It could have been the very one that was up on the mountain at the killing. The next day, they went into Marshall's Branch and stayed over in Kentucky and stayed with relatives until Heenan was able to travel, and then they went into a logging camp in Boggs, West Virginia, in Webster County. It was at a little logging camp at Boggs, West Virginia. Now, when they got to Boggs, see, they were married. Heenan was married to Henry Vanover's daughter that was killed, that Henry was killed, and then Cal was married too. Well, they would send letters back to their family, send money and send letters back to their wives. Well, there was a bounty on their head. See, Doc Taylor was apprehended and hung at Wise Courthouse on the 27th day of October in 1893. And so they put a bounty out on Heenan and Cal, $700 dead or alive. Didn't matter how they brought them in. They could be alive and kicking or be dead as a doornail, but they $700 reward for them. So that sounded good to Big Ed Hall and IT Doc Swindle and Gooseneck John Brannon. That sounded pretty good. They decided they could go up there and apprehend them boys because they'd intercepted their mail and knew they were coming. They were in Boggs, West Virginia. So they got on a train and they went to Bluefield. And from Bluefield they got on some horses and they rode into Boggs. Now, from Bluefield by car to Boggs is about 3 hours. I'd say it took them 2 or 3 days on horse to go in there because they had to go up the New River and around that way, and around Hinton and that way, Richwood, that area. That's how they got into Boggs. But they got up there sometime during the week, I'm not sure what day it was, and they inquired about them boys. There was a little country store there, and Boggs is just a little place in the road. I mean, there's 3 or 4 houses, and the marker says Boggs, West Virginia, and that's about it. Very rural. It's on Birch River in Webster County, West Virginia. I've been to Boggs. I've been to right where the shootout took place. I've seen Cal Fleming's grave up there. So I know where it's at, and you know, to look at it, you wouldn't think much of it. But they got up there, and there was a little country store that doubled as a post office. It was right on the side of the creek. When I went up there, the people that owned the property, they took me to the very spot where the little country store sit. They said it sit right here. And you know, I can just imagine, because there was the store and the creek run and then the road, you know, so I mean, you can just imagine it, you know, from what really happened. But when they got there, they inquired about them boys, and they knew who they were at the store, and they said, yeah, they work at that logging camp, and they come in every Saturday to get some provisions and get their mail. So they usually come every Saturday. So they knew they would be coming down to that store on Saturday, whatever day they got into Boggs. It could have been a Wednesday or Thursday, whatever. Now, there was a guy up there that when he found out that there was a $700 bounty on those boys, he said, well, buddy, I wish I'd have known that, because them 3 guys, Doc Swindle and John Branham and Ed Hall, they, you know, that was the 3 went up there to get them. So when they told that there was a bounty on his head, they said, on their head, they said, well, I wish I'd have knew that. Because if I knew that, I just took them myself and got that money. And Ed Hall said, well, buddy, said, you might have, said, you West Virginia boys may be a lot tougher than us Virginia boys. He said, but they shot their way through 22 of us down there in Virginia. But he said, you might be good enough to do that, but they shot their way through 22 of us, said, you might have and you might not. So Saturday morning came, and that guy, he said, well, I'll go on up ahead and make sure they're coming. So he took up toward where that logging camp was, and he saw 2 guys on horseback coming down. And he asked their names. He said, can you tell me who you are? And when they done that, they pulled their pistols on him, give him a good cussing, say they wanted to know who the blankety blank wanted to know who they were. And of course he got real, you know, he wasn't as brave then, you know. He said, well, now listen, he said, I'm just in here doing a census. He said, I'm taking a people's census and I'm just trying to find out who lives here in this area. I didn't mean nothing by that. So after they gave him a good cussing out, they rode on. Now a lot of accounts said that those three guys, that Ed Hall and Doc Swinell and John Branham, they hid in another building and went in on them after they went into that store. Now that wasn't what Heenan said. And Heenan said when they got down there, that they opened the door and stepped inside and said they didn't say throw your hands up, you're under arrest. They said they just started shooting. Never said a word, just started shooting. Well, they shot Cal dead right there in the doorway, shot him down dead, right in the doorway. He never even got to get his gun out of his holster. Well, that left Heenan to fight three. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Heenan done a pretty daggone good job fighting three of them. He shot Ed Hall in the top of the head. He had a big wire, he had a big hat, had a wire brim, went all the way around it. He shot him in the top of the head, and he hit that wire, and it unraveled that wire all the way off that calf. And Ed fell in the floor. Well, Heenan thought he'd killed him. What he done, he gave him a concussion. He didn't, you know, he just knocked him out, basically, with that shot. But I guess he thought he killed him. Well, Doc Swinell was hiding behind a pot-belly stovepipe going up through the ceiling. He shot him through that stovepipe in the neck. Well, Doc Swinell, he staggered out and fell in the creek. There's two down. That left John Branham. Well, he shot John Branham down. Well, the problem was that Ed come to and got the drop on him, and he was standing over John getting ready to finish him off, and he got the drop on him and said, put your gun down or I'm going to kill you, you know, so nothing to do. But Heenan had to give up. Now, Heenan didn't come out of that shootout smelling like a rose either. He was shot in the mouth, shot every tooth on one side of his face, shot every tooth out of his mouth. One of the bullets hit the barrel of his gun and split that barrel all the way down to the cylinder, jumped that cylinder and went into his wrist and lodged right underneath his elbow. My uncle, who was 10 years old at the time, said that Heenan came in to visit and he said there's a big blue bulge under his elbow there with that bullet. They never did take it out. That bullet was lodged there. And he might have been shot another place or two, but that's the two places I knew he was shot. But got the drop on him. And so he laid down there beside John Branham and they cussed one another to see which one. Heenan said, you'll die before I will. And John said, no, you'll die before I will. Well, John died. So, but Heenan made it. And so they had to wait. All of them, I guess, had to recuperate. You know, Doc Swinell had been shot in the neck, and Ed Hall had been shot in the top of the head, and Heenan been shot up. So after they got well enough to travel, they came back down here to stand trial. Well, someone had killed Jane. And many say is their brother, Heenan and Cal's brother killed her, but I mean, they couldn't prove it. But she'd been killed. So there was no eyewitness to identify Heenan as being there at the killing on the mountain. They didn't have any way to prove it because she was dead. They didn't have no way of proving it other, you know, than hearsay. And so they let Heenan come clean. He come clear. Well, when he come clear, he went back to West Virginia, took his wife and raised his family up there, became a law officer. For many years in Webster County, was a policeman in Webster County, or a sheriff, or whatever, but he was a law officer in Webster County, raised his family up there, and that's where, you know, he's buried up there. I've been to Cal Fleming's grave in Boggs. At the very top of the cemetery, the cemetery is not kept up. It's pretty bad shape. But I went up looking around for his grave. At the very top of it, there's a marker, really nice marker that his mother had put up for him where he lay. And John Branham is buried there too, Gooseneck John, but he was buried in an unmarked grave, so I don't know exactly where in that cemetery he's buried. But he is buried there, but don't know exactly where. But do know where Cal was buried because we got a pretty marker up for him. And it's really interesting to go up there and see that. I wanted to see that because it kind of put picture to my mind of what they told them, or Heenan told, because Cal. Oh, and another thing, when that bullet split that barrel of that gun, and that bullet went into his wrist, he just reached over in Cal's holster, and he was laying there dead, and pulled his pistol out and just kept on shooting. Now, people talk about the OK Corral all they want to, and all what happened out in the Wild West, but you can't tell me that what happened up there in that little store was any less than what happened out in West on some of these shootouts. My opinion is, if they hadn't shot Cal dead, I'd say they'd been through, them other three been laying there dead, and they'd come out of it. But they, you know, Heenan 1 on 3 might be a little bit different story if Cal could have cleared his pistol. That happened on the 14th day of January, 1894. Almost 20 months to the day that killing took place on the mountain on May 14th, 1892. Cal Fleming lay dead. He'd been 24 years old when he got killed. But that's the story that was told by the boys that were up there on the mountain. Heenan and Cal told their brother, and what Heenan said happened at the shootout, because Cal couldn't tell it, he was laying there dead, but when they come back, he told his brother what happened up there at the store. So that's the story of the Killing Rock, and that's the story of what happened in Boggs. You want me to tell that other story? You wanted to hear it, didn't you? About my grandmother. You know, I mean, my grandmother was born in 1889, and she lived with us. Her name was Rosie Sowers. She was a Branham, and she married my grandfather. He was a Sowers, William Sowers. And she lived with us for 16 years. And as a boy and a teenager growing up, you don't pay old people any mind, heck, they're just in the way. You got better things to do than listen to them. But I wish, in hindsight, that I'd paid attention and had been more involved with her and asked her questions. It's amazing what she could have told me about what happened out in the south of the mountain the time she grew up. But she was born in 1889. Now, I guess it was her first cousin, Mac Austin, because his mother was a sister to my mother's, or my grandmother's, to my grandmother, great-grandmother. And anyway, Mac Austin, they went by Wright. He was a Wright. I mean, his daddy was a Wright, but his mother was an Austin, but they went by Mac Austin. Enoch Wright was his uncle. And he was about 18 years old, and I asked my grandmother right before she died, I said, Ma, I said, who's the meanest man you ever know that lived out here in the south of the mountain? And she said, Ed Cox. Just didn't hesitate, Ed Cox. I said, well, what was it about Ed Cox? Well, Ed lived out about where the archery range used to be, out in the south of the mountain, where Wallace Mullins' place is. And he was just a big, mean, overbearing bully. Everybody was afraid of him. And he was married to a Sowers, and that lady's sister was named Exeter. It's E-X-E-T-E-R, so I'm just going to say Exeter. But she was a very pretty girl, and they thought that Ed was struck on her, That would have been his sister-in-law, but he struck on her. And Mac was trying to date her. Well, that made Ed mad. Well, he got Ed out there at the Stormy Gap. Anybody know where the Stormy Gap is? Out in the mountain. That's where Hibbert Tackett lives, out in south of the mountain. And there was a bunch of men out there. Well, he grabbed Mac, and he sopped his face in a mud hole. He cussed him real good and told him to leave her alone, that he didn't want to see her around, him around her or anything, and embarrassed him in front of them men. Well, the next day, Ed Cox and Paris White and Smith Whitaker had left to take some liquor up on South Fork. And where I grew up, the road where the old home place was, where I grew up, where my grandmother was raised, you could see out the roadway a long way, coming up through there. Well, while they were going up on South Fork, Enoch Wright and Mac showed up at the house and sat down on the porch, and Mac had a .30-30 Winchester. So he's going to wait on Ed. He had a score to settle with him. So later on, however long it was, they seen him coming. Well, when they seen him coming on horse, Enoch and Mac, they walked up and crossed a rail fence that was up there at the top of the hill over into the road, and Mac stood in the middle of the road with that .30-30 waiting on them to come on up. Well, when they rode up, he told Ed, he said, Ed, you need to get down off that horse. I got a score to settle with you. Ed Cox, he had that gun, pointing at him. And my grandmother said she stood right on the porch and seen it all happen. Stood right on the porch, and from the porch to where that happened, been about like near the guardrail over there. And he told him, get off that horse, and I got a score to settle with you. Ed Cox said, son, you put that rifle down, because when I get off this horse, I'm going to stomp your ribs together faster than hell can scorch a feather. When he said that, Mac shot the top of his head off. Shot him right off that horse, shot his brains out. My great-grandfather took a shoveled his brains up and buried him on the side of the road. Shot him right off that horse. Now, that's a nervy fella with a guy with a .30-30, looking you in the eye, and he tells him that. It's the last thing he ever got to tell anybody, because he shot his head off. But that's true. That's what happened. Now Mac, after that happened, he went over in Kentucky and stayed with some people over there and never did stand trial for that killing. Never did. He'd come back and visit, but he lived over in Kentucky. Every now and then he'd come back and check on everybody over in the south of the mountain, but he never did stand trial for it. Now, that is actual events, but there is a little legend that goes with that. Now, you know, it's a legend. It could be true, it might not be true. It's just a legend. But Paris White, now Smith Whitaker was on a little fast mule, they said. He's a real fast mule, run fast. And Paris was on horseback. And for some reason, Paris was a nervous type of guy or anything. I guess when he told Ed to get off that horse, Paris just dismounted too. You know, he'd stand there in the road when he shot Ed off that horse. Well, when Mac Austin shot Ed Cox off that horse, said Paris screamed like a woman. Just loud, high-pitched, shrill, you know. And he jumped that rail fence in one jump. They said it's 10 rails high. Said he cleared it in one jump, high hurdled that baby, never knocked the rail down, and took off a squall and went up what we call the Lemonfield Holler toward Haddonfield. Now, when he shot Ed off that horse, Smith was on that fast mule. Smith broke that mule to run toward Stormy Gap, up the road. But, you know, Paris took the detour around up through the woods. Well, my great uncles, Ivory and Lovell Sires, and my great grandfather, Noah Sires, were up there in Haddonfield. They was hoeing corn up there. A lot of people hold corn up in that area. And they said they were hoeing corn, and said all of a sudden they could hear like it was the wind. The trees laps started going. They said, what in the world? They looked up, Miss Paris going through the treetops. Said he hollered, said, boys, said, get out of here, run for your lives. Mac Austin's killed Ed Cox, he's killing everybody in sight. Run for your lives, get out of here, you know. Said, just kept on going through the treetops. Now Smith's on that fast mule. And he gets out to the Stormy Gap, and that mule's all flecked up with sweat, you know, and just wore out, and he'd run it up there, and when he got there, Paris was waiting on him. He said, where have you been, Smith? Said, Lord have mercy. He said, we got to get out of here. He said, Mac's going to kill us too, you know. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's legend. Could be, could not. But now, actually, the actual killing that my grandmother saw, that's exactly what happened. So there were some mean, nervy people. I would say, you know, more likely, she said that Ed Cox, the meanest man she ever knew, because it takes a pretty mean man to look somebody with a rifle pointing at him and say he's going to stomp the ribs together faster than hell could scorch a feather. But as I say, that's the last words he ever spoke, because he got his brain shot out when he said that. All right, that's what I got. Hope you enjoy it.
Story. And Royce, I didn't know anything about the story you were going to tell, but it's very similar. What I'm going to tell you. And in this one, his name wasn't Mac, it was Jack.
Jack. Okay.
And it wasn't Ed, it was Terrell Cox. So, I grew up on Elkhorn Creek on what's called Kelly Mountain, also known as Vanover Holler. Near what's called, I don't know if some people know, on the ridge up there, Terrapin Bottom, Cantrell Gap, Osborne Gap, all them places. And there was another place you said Gromy Gap. I knew one called Grogan Gap over on the Kentucky side. Well, this was in a time when the mountains, a lot of the trees were cut down and it was corn every place you could put it. Every nook and cranny, somebody put a corn in it to grow. And my great uncle was Jack Kelly. But there's some rumors in the family that the name wasn't Kelly years before, because some things had happened and they came over the mountain from Dickinson and Wise County and changed their name to avoid controversy and to not have their name associated with some crimes that had happened. So Jack Kelly, my uncle way back, my papa told me this story. He was a bad man, you know, and he had a gang that he ran around with and stuff, and he was known, a bad dude. Well, there was a man named Terrell Cox, who I guess had gotten a hold of a fast horse and a big gun, and he started making a name for himself as a bad man. And he was telling everybody that he could, you tell Jack Kelly, next time that I see him, I'm going to kill him. Well, Jack had a lot of work to do at home, hoeing corn, and you know, he didn't want to deal with this Terrell Cox running around saying he was going to kill him. So to remedy that situation, when he went out to hoe corn, he put on a bonnet and a dress so that if Terrell Cox come riding by, he'd think it was just a woman out there hoeing corn in the field. And he did that long enough. He got tired of it, and he came in and he told Grandpa Kelly, he came to the table in the middle of a real hot day, took the bonnet off and he threw it down on the table. He said, I'm tired of wearing a bonnet, tired of wearing a dress. I'm gonna kill Terrell Cox. So he went out, middle of the road, waiting one day, and here come Terrell on his horse. And he looked at Jack and he said, Jack, what are you doing out here in the middle of the road? Ain't you heard I'm gonna kill you? Just like you said. Boom, shot him down, got his horse, took it to the barn. And that was the end of Terrell Cox. Do I have a minute more? I'll tell another Cox story. John Cox, on the Kentucky side. You've heard of that name?
I can tell one on him too.
You can? All right. Well, he got killed, right? Is that why you know?
Well, John Cox I'm thinking about, yeah, he disappeared and they never did know what happened to him. But they thought he was burned up under a steel place back in the day.
Well, I'll tell you what happened.
So he didn't get burned up under a steel place.
No.
Okay.
Well, John Cox grew up, the way I heard it, he grew up kind of poor, modest family, and they didn't have a whole lot going for him. But as he got a little bit older, he started making moonshine, running moonshine, and got him some nice clothes and a nice, pretty, sleek horse and a big gun. And that caught the favor of a girl down on Elkhorn Creek, real beautiful girl. And he would go down off the mountain to go see her and spend time with her and, you know, court her. But there was a family over on that side, the Potters, and it was a guy and his two sons that run around, and they claimed they were the law of those parts, and they enforced the law as they saw fit. One of those Potter boys liked that girl, you know, and he heard that John Cox was going down there and visiting her and spending time with her, and he didn't like that. And I suppose they thought, oh, well, John Cox too, he's running moonshine, he's a criminal. Well, we'd kill him if we want to. So one day, John was coming off the mountain, dressed up nice on his horse, and going down to see this girl. We don't know who she is. I know in a lot of stories I've heard there's just a beautiful girl. Nobody knows her name. But John was coming down off the mountain, and there were the Potters in the middle of the road waiting for him. And they said, John, where do you think you're going? And he said, well, I'm going down to see my girl. And they shot his horse and killed the horse. They got him, and there's a rock on the other side of the Pine Mountain Ridge in Pike County on the road that I grew up on. I still live there today. We called it the Big Rock. And my papa, the first time he told me this story, he was telling me at this rock, they laid John Cox out on this rock and they filled him full of bullets. My papa showed me on that rock, there was lines in it, just 3 dug in lines on that rock. And he said that's where when they shot him, as he was getting shot, he kicked real hard, and back in those days, you know, there was nails in your shoes, and they said that's where the nails dug into the rock. And maybe they hid his body, they didn't let anybody know about it, and maybe that's where John Cox went. But the addition to that story, the little bit of a legend, was that his ghost would take that same path down the mountain in the night, and there were different stories of people saying it felt like something jump on the back of their horse when they would ride that old road down the mountain. So that's my story of from the Coxes, and about the Coxes and what we were known as the Kellys on the other side of the mountain. But I had heard that our names, that side of the family's name was Branham, and that something had happened. I heard one story was that it was some undefined murder. The other one was that one was a circus performer and killed one of the people that they worked with and ran away, and they changed their name from Branham to an older family name of Kelly to avoid any problems and controversy. But that's my 2 stories. I had no idea you was going to tell that. A little bit different.
Yeah.
Might have been two separate incidents.
It may be a different John Cox. The one I'm talking about lived in Dixon County. So it may be a different John
Well,
Cox.
where I live at, on my front porch, I'm looking at Dickinson County from my front porch, where I'm at in
They called
Pike
him Little Bad John Cox from Dixon County. But I can tell a story on him, you want me to.
I think we have time? Yeah, I want to hear it.
Tell a quick story on John. John would come and work for my grandfather, and they'd rock the fields. Where I live now, you know, I've got this beautiful pasture, but you can look down below and there's a big rock wall that we got a beautiful pasture, because they would get people, he would hire people to come in and get the rock out of the field and on sled and haul it down there, and they made a beautiful rock wall. And it runs about like from here to the guardrail too, and it's about this high, so a lot of rock come off the fields. But John, they said he called himself Little Bad John Cox from Dixon County. And he liked to impress people, liked to tell stories about how, you know, he was well known and more or less famous, you know, that he had a reputation. Well, he went out, he said, to out in California. And he said he was walking he told me, he said he was walking, and the way he had a gruff voice, said, I was walking the streets of Los Angeles, California. 2 pearl handle 45s on my side, and a beautiful young woman walked up to me and said, pardon me, sir, aren't you Little Bad John Cox from Dixon County? I said, lady, I'm sorry to say, but I'm the man. But I thought that was cute, you know, he would tell that. Los Angeles, California. Now, a real true story, he had talked to my grandfather, William Sayers, called him Bill, you know, and he'd been out there working for him, and my grandfather had 2 mules, and he said one day, just right out of the blue, John said, Bill said, don't you know you want to fool around and let somebody steal one of your mules? He said, well, John, who'd steal one of my mules? I said, my mules don't, you know, they're off the road, they're not around people. He said, now, who's going to steal my mules? You know, he said, well, you're going to get one of your mules stolen. What about a week later, one of his mules went missing. Went down there at the barn, no mule. And they got to tracking around and they didn't see no tracks or nothing. And they got down in Spring Branch so far, and they finally got the tracks. He put some whatever over the hooves, you know, and tied them up with some sackcloth or whatever, couldn't make track. And that mule, when he got down into Spring Branch, he took them off, and they tracked that mule all the way into to Camp Creek, Brush Creek, where John lived, and found that mule tied up behind his house. Well, my grandfather went out to the law and said he wanted to swear a warrant out for him that he got his mule. And they said, well, we're not going to get involved with that. They said, we're just going to deputize you, and you can go get him. They sprayed of him, I guess, you know. So they deputized my grandfather and Harry McFall, who went out there with him. So they went out there and they knocked on the door, and he said, John said, I'm here to arrest you for stealing my mule. When he said that, Harry grabbed him and pulled him away from the door and said that, shot 5 shots through that door. John did. When they done that, they started shooting into the house. Well, John's wife, and he had 2 daughters. His daughter was shot in the shoulder, and they were screaming, carrying on. So John just gave up. He had to spend time in the penitentiary over that. He spent about a year in the penitentiary. So that's the reason I'm saying it might be a different John Cox. But now he spent about a year or 2 in the penitentiary for stealing that mule. Sure did.
Sound like he got around a lot.
Yeah, might have been the same one, might not.
Might have died to come back.
But they apprehended him, you know. But he shot through that door. Said he emptied a 38 through that door. Said Harry, when he stand in front of the door, knocked on the door, said, "Come out here." Said, "I've got a warrant for you for stealing my mule." And Harry just jerked him back from the door and pow, 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 right through that door. So anyway, yeah, his daughter got shot, and it was just a mess. But he wound up serving time over there, and that is true. Now about the Los Angeles story, I don't know if that's true or not. It might be. I don't know. He told me.
Well, that was entertaining and interesting, and I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Royce.
You're welcome.
All right. Up next, we're gonna get into some music for you. We got Tiffany Williams here. Tiffany's a native of Eastern Kentucky. She's a coal miner's daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter, and an exciting, emerging voice who crafts achingly beautiful songs. Oh, I like the way he said that. Achingly beautiful songs about what it means in her experience to be from the Appalachian Mountains. Everybody give a big hand Tiffany Williams.
Check, check, check. It's ready to go. Well, it's so good to be back home. I'm from Letcher County originally, so we would come over here to shop and everything, you know. It's a big city over this way, Wise County. I've been in Nashville about 8 years, I guess. Seems crazy to think that it's that long, but I don't get to come home very often. And so when I do, it's a treat because even just to hear people talk like I talk, you know, it's a big deal. No, I'm serious.
Absolutely. I know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to play some songs for you that are about home, and then some that are just sad sack folk songs. So this sounds like a still frame of itself, and when I come back, I'm the ghost of someone else, and I'm back in the context of you, reliving everything I did and I did not do. It hits me every time I cross that line. The pit of my gut scooped out like a deep mine. Here's where your memory lives. So I got out, but a whole lot of good that did. I still feel it. Reef big enough to be a mountain. A mountain big enough to have a name. I know by now I'm supposed to not love you, but I love you all the same. I keep waiting on that to change. I see you every time I fall asleep. Your eyes meet mine, that's what breaks the dream. Then I'm numb the rest of the day, chilled by a hollow feeling that I cannot shake. I watch your name move across their lips. They think I'm fine, I let them go on thinking it. Breaking down won't do anybody good, so I shore myself up with beams of borrowed wood. Jim Beam Library. Reef big enough to be a mountain. A mountain big enough to have a name. I know by now I'm supposed to not love you, but I do. I keep waiting on that to change. I hear your voice close and whispering. Wherever you are, you'll never be there again. Yeah, so I think I'm going to go ahead and play y'all one that I wrote recently. How many know where Dunham Hill is, or where McRoberts Hill is? Okay, so Dunham Hill is a coal road between McRoberts and Dunham, and it's fallen off on the sides, and you know it's one lane and twisty, and And so one day in Nashville, because I keep home with me all the time, but one day I was in Nashville and I woke up and it was storming really bad. I woke up because it was storming so bad. And then I went back to sleep, and every time I wake up and go back to sleep, there's a dream that happens. You know, it's in that in-between state where you're kind of awake and kind of not. So so I had a dream that I was going over Dunham Hill, but it had just dropped off. And so there's this big chasm between the two, you know, pieces of road. And so, so I wrote a song about it, as I do. But it ended up being a murder ballad, and it's still fairly new. So we'll see if it changes later. But yeah, so it starts out, I had a dream that Dunham Hill was crumbling. I played this maybe, I don't even think I played this out before. I think I've just shared it with people. But anyway, this is called Dunham Hill. Whoa, we're not gonna sing it there. No, no, no. I had a dream that Dunham Hill was crumbling. The road around her neck was severed wide. I tried but could not get to where I was going. So I resigned to stay on the other side. The angry winds around me all were howling. Lightning struck the ground whereon I stood. The branches curled and shook in hangnail moonlight. Come to any good. Home is waiting on the farther shore. Home waits for you across the sea. You are none too fit for the going, so you will have to stay a while with me. I scoured the land in search of safer passage to where my dearest dear waited for me. I heard a faint and forlorn voice imploring, vanquish hope, concede to what must be. Home is waiting on the farther shore. Home waits for you across the sea. But you are none too fit for the goal, so you will have to stay a while with me. On souls deceived, they found a body buried, shallow in the loam and cracked leaf fall. Upon its breast there lay my lover's locket, and in its hoary hair my fingers glowed. Home is waiting on the farther shore. Home waits for you across the sea. You are none too fit for the goal, so you will have to stay a while with me. Go down, dear souls, and take your leave of waiting. The elements are quick and not your friend. Dance your days in sun with lovers spinning. I pray that you are long to meet your end. Home is waiting on the farther shore. Home waits for you across the sea. You are none too fit Oh goodness. Yeah, that one's a little, I don't know about that arrangement. I'll have to see how long that one will be. That's all the verses anyway. How long till the dam gives out? And what good is my praying doing now when all I feel is this constant empty ache? And all I get is grief and bills that I can't pay. It ain't like I don't work, I work from sun up to dark of day. But it don't do me no good, no way. So I quit wanting everything I knew I couldn't have. I had it in my buggy, but I put it back. 'Cause the woman at the register says all they take is cash, and all that's in my purse is an EBT card and 2 full packs of Winston Lights that I got trading cases of Coke and Sprite at a store where the man understands. It's hard living in a world that don't give a damn. Don't tell me all I want's a handout. I'd like to see you dig your way out. I'm so tired of hearing the lucky say they're blessed. Did God shine on you and say forget the rest? Doesn't he know that I'm still down here trying my best? With this heart of stone still beating in my chest. I quit wanting everything I knew I couldn't have. I had it in my buggy, but I put it back. 'Cause the woman at the register says all they take is cash, and all that's in my purse is an EBT card and 2 full packs of Winston Lights that I got for trading cases of Coke and Sprite at a store where the man understands. And it's hard living in a world that don't give a damn about you or the things you've been through or the dreams that you had back when you could stomach dreaming. Lord, it's hard. I don't know where I am on time. I'm good for whatever. Wait, one more for the set, you think? Okay, I'll do a couple more. This is the song that I wrote that I meant to be a country song, but then I ended up singing it. And it's on my new record, which is coming out in August, I think. Thank goodness, I've been sitting on it for a year. I'm tired of all these songs. I'm ready to do something different. And you sang that love song, it wasn't about me, but I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be. For years I've been loving you. You let me 'cause you want me to, but you don't want me. I wanted you to know. said I love him. It wasn't about you, but you wanted it to be. You wanted it to be. She had you believe, and she felt the same feeling that took you to your knees. You wanted her to know. We can do is to quit wanting what we can't have. If your consolation prize is me, but you don't love me back, well, I guess I'm alright with that. You sang that love song. It wasn't about me, but I wanted it to be. Back home songs and sad sack songs. Sometimes it's both. With a sad guitar. Okay, I'm gonna do one more, and then y'all gonna hear some more good storytelling. This one is called No Bottom. If I had it to do different, I'd have pissed more people off. I'm not worried about the cost of indiscretion, and I give a damn who I lost. I demand exactly what I deserve, instead of taking what's given to me. And I'd walk away from you the minute I saw you, instead of laying prostrate at your feet. What they don't tell you is it don't matter what you do. You can play by all the rules and still lose the game. There's no guarantees, and nothing stays the same. So live it how you want while you can, 'cause there's no bottom to anything. I've been the picture of virtue. I've kept my teeth on my tongue, and I've been the drunkest girl at the party, breathing your name like fire from my lungs. I spent my best years believing you were where I needed to be. I'd let you win, pretend I didn't need nothing, so you'd save a little space for me. What they don't tell you is it don't matter what you do. You can make all the right turns and still lose your Thank you.
If we clap long enough, will you do one more?
I will come back if y'all sit tight. I'm gonna come back 2 more times. You're
All
gonna
right.
be wanting to get rid of me.
Oh, no, I thought you said this was your last one.
That's my last song for this time. She'll be back to life.
Tiffany Williams, everybody, one more big round of applause. What talent we have in these mountains. What talent. Yeah, and just as Tiffany was saying, she will be back a couple more times, right? For a couple more sets in between stories here. And up next here, we have Kyra Higgins. And Kyra has a dramatic, poetic telling here.
Alright, hi folks. So, when I tell a story, I never like to tell it alone. So what that means is I need some volunteers. I just need 3 volunteers if I can get any.
3 volunteers.
3. Okay. I'll tell you what you're doing because throughout this night, okay, I got some volunteers coming up. Awesome. What is it? Okay.
Do I go up there?
Back up. So I'm gonna keep y'all here for 1 second. Now, the other part of me not telling the story by myself is I still want some help from you all. So there'll be a part in the story where kind of everybody here, you're going to represent my thoughts going on. Thank you. You're going to represent kind of my thoughts going on. So you're all my thoughts right now. It's me interacting with me. It's weird, I know. But there will be a time where I do like this. You'll see this little hand motion and it stays in the air. And you can start clapping when I do that. And then when I bring it down, you can stop clapping. I do want to practice this out for a second because I know how that goes. So the signal is I'll put my hand in the air. And then when it comes down, yeah, awesome, you guys got this. All right, let me take care of this other one and then I'll be ready. I think I'm at the right place. I think I've arrived, yes. I look around in this room, there's big windows, light shining in, a cold cement. And there's a circle of chairs in the middle of the room. Why is there a circle of chairs? No one's going to explain that? Okay. I'm just here. I don't know any of y'all, but there's a circle of chairs. I just want you to know that. Okay. I don't know what to do now. Do I just wait for someone to come up? And as soon as I think that, here comes this lady. She stands in the circle of chairs and said, "Everyone, I want to introduce you to this thing that we do. It's called a story circle. I know that you've all just met and we're trying to get to know each other, so I figured this would be a way to do it. We all sit down, there's this person that comes forth and he says, we all know and tell stories. We just do them in our own way. And all I need you to know that for this story circle, a story is something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I just give you one question that you have to answer with your story." It's like, okay, I can do this. That's not hard. We all sit down, I take my place in the circle, and I realize I have made a mistake. I am sitting in the middle of the circle. Not the end, not the beginning, the middle of the circle. And so they've told us, don't try to think about your thing, just say it when it comes to you. But how can you not? Here's this person talking, telling their story, and I'm like, what is my thing? They're gonna get to me, I'm not gonna have something to say, and it's gonna be done for 3 minutes. Huh? I'm in the middle of the circle, y'all. But he looks at us, he reassures us, and he said, you just have to talk for a certain amount of time, and then we'll let you go. Trust me, nobody else here is prepared. Now I'll tell you your prompt. And that's why I bring it here today. He asked, what is community? We all had to answer it in our own way. So I sit in the circle, and into my mind pops a little house. To give you some more on this little house, it sits on a hill. And in this little house are 4 crazy children and their one mama who tries to corral them all the time. And then I think, well, somebody just talked about community. This seems too small. What else is community? Into my head pops the Lord's Prayer and this nifty little dance that my mama taught me. And I finally get along and I'm like, well, it still feels like other people here have a lot more to say than I do. Is this what I want to say? I'm not sure. What else is there to community for me? What else? And a little letter comes in mind. I don't know if you can see. It's got like little cartoons and stuff on it. And we'll get to that. So I'm sitting here scared out of my mind thinking, what is community? And these 3 things come forward. And then the magical thing happens. The magical thing that the head of the story circle told us would happen, but I did not believe him. He said, while other people are telling their stories, yours will come to you. So I'm sitting there and I think of that little home. And I think of what my mom told me, and I think, well, family is home. Family makes me feel at place. Family supports me. And a memory pops into my mind. I hear her say, step up to me. Now put your hands out. All right. Now you showed me this nifty little flag of yours. I like that a lot. How often do you use it? Would you like to use it more? I was like, well, yeah, sure. I like it a lot. She's like, well, Mama's gonna teach you something. And I hold out my flag to her, and she steps forward and she said, when you move with purpose. Every arm in the air is a call to God. So I use my flag for worship. You begin with that call, and you let it get louder. She stood there and she's like, I don't know how you like to end it, but I like to have an ending. So I want you to remember this too. Take a step back, twirl around, and then you just do you. So. She said, remember this. I know this is important to you, and I want you to remember this. Now I see my mom as a guide. I don't know about the rest of y'all. I know the stories can change. That's always been her role for me. Anything that I've sought, she seeks to deepen. She's the one that says you can do this. Now remember that little home? It also had 4 crazy little children running around in it. One of those crazy children is me. So you've met me. I'll tell you a little bit about the others. One's the older sister. I don't know about y'all, but my older sister, she ran the house when Mom was not home. If she had to, when things went bump in the night, she was there holding the knife like, okay, nobody's hurting my siblings. Everybody get behind me. And she has become my strength. Always the one to say, I came here before you. Here's what I learned. I know that the road's scary, but I'll pass this on. The next little crazy child? Next little crazy child is my older brother. To describe him in one word, I would have to say reserved. Now everybody loves him, but he don't talk to nobody. So I don't get that. But everybody loves him. But for me, he's the stern one. You come to him, he's the brutally honest, I will tell you how it is, and don't question me because you came and asked me. Like, okay. And anytime I was doing something out of the way, it'd be a, now Kyra. Now Kyra. We got to talk. The very last little crazy child running around the house was my little sister. I like to call her the bird. She's the free spirit. She's the one that reminds me that when you see things, you say something about it. You don't just watch it happen. And even if you couldn't in the moment, you figure out something to do. And she reminds me, hey, that little idea you had that you think that maybe you shouldn't do, well, maybe we should do it together. And that's my little sister. So here I am in my thoughts of home, that community that I share. And here forward comes the little letter. You know, I'm thinking of home, laying in my bed, and I remember this letter under my pillow. Now this comes from the little child from within. I know her as the dreamer. She likes to dream. And she was around the most during a very tumultuous time in my life, thinking of what life could be like after. And I take out the letter from her. And it's a long list of things that she wants. Now, at this time, I hadn't thought of that letter in a long, long time. But I'm starting to look at the list and I realize I've already achieved some of those things that I never thought that I would as a little girl. She said, I want to speak in front of people. She said, I want to be at events with people that I've come to know that are doing the things that I love. I want to draw, I want to paint, I want to write poetry. And I said, okay, but I didn't know how to do any of those things then. And she said, I want friends, but I don't want just any friends. I want the friends that stay around during the tough times and the good times, and I can tell you now, I found them. And then there's a small little note at the bottom that always breaks my heart a little bit. And it was, I want to be happy. Now I know usually when we think of community, we think of other people, but in this moment, going through something horrible and only being able to understand myself, the fullness of it, this little girl was there to remind me that there are better days. And I remember that she didn't know what that feeling was like then. But as I sit and think, I do now. And I wouldn't have thought about it or tried to figure it out if she hadn't left this little letter for me. Now I remembered this letter because this story circle happened to be in the summer, the year that I was to go to college. I'd done everything in my power to not think about college. It was something new, it was something stressful. I was going to be living in a room with somebody that I had heard horror stories about roommates. I was like, okay, well, maybe they'll be nice, please. So I didn't want to think about it. But it's the middle of the night, the day before packing, and I'm like, huh. I gotta face this somehow, so I open an email, it has my roommate's name on it, and she says, here's my Facebook. So of course, I get on Facebook, I stay on Facebook, and I start scrolling my dear little heart out, because I'm trying to distract myself. But as I scroll, I found something unexpected. And I found this post that says, "The Artidote." So I started like, okay, well, what's this? It has a fun little picture on it. Scrolling through. You ever find something and you think that speaks to me? I needed something like this now. I was staring at this post that I was not expecting to find and was just mindlessly scrolling through, and it spoke to me. I think you all will want to know it too. Let me tell you something. This is how the post started. We love pretending that our jagged edges tantamount to a beautiful disaster. But in reality, there ain't nothing beautiful about shaky hands holding a cigarette and empty eyes staring at the cracks in walls. You know what is beautiful instead? Music that makes your soul flow like a river. The day you find your purpose. Long car rides and singing so loud that no one can shut you up now. From now on, you, and I'm thinking me, you are going to romanticize healing. The very bottom, poem by Lana Raphael, photography by Roman Machinko. And here in this little post was the beginning of something new for me. You see, this community I found was began by the Artidote. This poem, this picture, this art, they always do this. And they ask people to come together to talk. Now, I've never seen this before. This was new to me. And in these people, I kind of found a home away from home. Something that comforted me about not being physically present with the folks that you love. Because all these people I met through this one post that led me to this other community, none of them knew each other in person, but they all shared experiences. They all shared how a poem gave them the opportunity to talk about how they felt, what they were going through, how art was something that helped them survive. And it was that for me too. So, we skipped the very many long 4 years of college. And at one point, I'm walking on campus, just walking. I don't even remember what I was doing because I had nothing in particular to do at the time. And I stopped because this realization just hits me. Feels like I've just been like handed something to my chest. And someone's like, here for you. From this experience, I wrote this. I've arrived. I stand here on the sidewalk, sunlight beaming from the library, shining all around me and the landscape. I pause. I've arrived. I no longer need ask, who am I? And who am I meant to be? I've arrived. How illuminating. Difficult lessons led me here to this truth. I walk not only in the sunlight, but also as who I'm meant to be. And then another memory, as I'm sitting in this chair thinking about community, comes forth. I hear the applause, I see light shining in my face, I can barely see, and I was holding a trophy. Oh, I remember this. This was speech, state championship. I had just been announced the first place winner of declamation. I had no clue this was coming. I walked out of that finals room thinking, okay, I did all right. I'm up for this. I might make third place, and here I am standing. They just handed me first place. What was happening? So yeah, I was loving it. But it wasn't the trophy that made me remember this moment. You see, I come from a rural area. A lot of the speech people, students and schools that participate in it, they're usually located in like Lexington, Louisville, places like that, and they're the ones that you see on the stage winning the awards. But here I was from Knott County Central High School, somewhere in eastern Kentucky that most of the students I met didn't know about, and were very confused about how I got there when I lived 2 hours away. And I'm like, yeah, we have school buses, we rent a hotel. I step off the stage, and here comes a girl I met earlier in the competition. She was from Jenkins. And this is what stuck with me. She said, I'm so glad to see someone from where we're at standing on the stage. And that's when it hit me. Not only was my family community, but anybody from that place I was at who knew the experiences that we suffered, we endured, and we triumphed, when they see me and they hear where I'm from, I'm also community to them. There's a reach to that. So let's go back to that moment, sitting in the story circle. And I'm thinking, well, what is community? People are telling so many good things, and I don't know. I thought of home, it's too small. I thought of poetry, but does everybody get that? I thought of state championship, but does that sound like I'm bragging? And the light shines. And I sit there and it's my turn. I'll be honest, I don't remember what I said. I don't. But that question stayed in my mind of what is community? And I think every time I had that feeling of I'm supported, I'm loved, that moment of I've arrived, that moment of me reaching out to myself to write a letter, that's all community.
Thank you, Kyra. That was beautiful, and thank you for including me on the stage there. I'll feel included there. Up next, we have a story about growing up here in Pound. Jimmy Roberson. Robertson. Sorry, excuse me.
Hey, this is going to be short, sweet, and simple, but I'm Jimmy Robertson. I'm old now, I don't have much left in me to speak. I was very, very impressed to hear the story of someone else's journey, because what I'm going to do for you today is tell you about my journey, and I'm going to do it through a couple of my pictures that I've taken up, and I'm not selling art, I'm selling the experience that I want to share. I grew up here, within walking distance, maybe a quarter of a mile this road. It wasn't paved, it was dirt. I went to school here, I started in the 4th grade. The schoolyard was dirt. I'm standing on the basketball court, and the backboard is right there. I spent hours and hours and hours shooting hoops and watching people who could play, and great athletes, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. briefly in your song, it touched me. The people from Jenkins, Kentucky made this town. The money from Jenkins built these businesses. There was no income here other than the money from coal. And those families from Kentucky, Dickinson County, the Mead Creek Mine, those dollars built every business here. And my father, who was a businessman, depended on that dollar to support us. So I'm grateful. I know Jenkins Hill, or Dunham Hill, my dad worked at Dunham in the mine, so I know the area. And I've been gone 60 years. I left at 19 years old, I went in the Army. But my childhood, I grew up, if you could imagine here 60 years ago in April, what was going on here? Well, every April, the state of Virginia stocked that river with trout. And it was, you couldn't find a place to put a line in the water. There were so many kids from that bridge to the North Fork area to fish it. It was every April. And that's part of my childhood, part of my memories. The mountain behind here, I climbed that mountain so many times, I'd like to have a penny. I'd like to have the strength to do it now, but that's, it's part of growing up country, and I've taken that with me wherever I go. I'm not ashamed of saying, I'm from Pound, and I've been around the world once, not by choice. And I met a guy, closest friend I ever had from Elkhorn City. And you bond with people, not necessarily because you like them as a person, but we have things in common. The culture that we share together, it's very similar to the journey that we just heard this young ladies tell. My journey's no different. Your journey's no different. You take this with you where you go. And I've been discriminated against because of my language and the way I phrase my words, the clothes that I wore on my job, and my wife the same way, when you leave this area. But still, I have never turned my back on my roots. This is who we are as people, and I am extremely proud of that. So let me tell you my life story. And I went to Vietnam at 19 years old. Not by choice, but I was sent. People of Pound asked my generation to go, we did it. So anyway, from that, I came home. I wasn't hurt. I felt fortunate to have lived through that. I left Pound. I had a choice to go in the coal mines in Kentucky or the railroad in Norfolk, Virginia, and my dad said, you got to go. So I left. And I stayed 35 years on the railroad and retired. But my story is pretty complex because I think we evolve as people. I'm not the same child that fished in the Pound River. I'm not the same mechanic that worked for my father when I was 9 years old. But you evolve and we grow. And that's a story that we heard from the young lady just now. And it's so touching to me because I feel like that's part of me too. Everybody's story means, where am I today and where am I going to be tomorrow? And I've done more than my life than I ever dreamed. My gift to the people of Pound is to return that idea that you can be what you want to be if you pursue it. Children from Pound do not have the same opportunity that our generation had. And that's what we need to encourage and push and let them understand that the Pound that I knew, businesses galore, money coming in, it's different. But what do we leave these children except the opportunity to believe in themselves exactly like the young lady just told us? And so what am I doing with all these pictures? COVID. I'm a busy guy. I have never stopped in my life. I've worked on trains, planes, automobiles, and taken everything apart you can think of and put it back together because it's my brain. That's the way I think. So when I was cooped up in the house, I had a dear friend who helped me with some artwork on a model train layout, and I watched her do it, and I thought, holy moly, I might be able to try that. So I went to the art store, picked up a couple of pieces of canvas, and I thought, let me tell my life story in art. And I watched a lot of public television episodes of Bob Ross, who's famous for portrait painting, not portrait painting, but landscape painting. And I thought, well, that's easy enough. I can draw a tree. So I gave it a shot, and I was very satisfied with my work. But more so, I wanted to express in my work who I am as a human being and where I've been. So I'm not selling art. I'm saying enjoy what I do. If you see it, if your eye can see what I'm trying to portray here, you will pick up the idea that my journey is not complete. My journey is a continuous effort to change who I am and how I think and what I do with my brain. And as long as you have a couple of brain cells that are still clicking and your memory leaves us, let's just admit it. When you're 75, you're thinking, man, I can't remember what I had for breakfast. But I want to engage my mind and present it to the world and say, hey, you can pursue something in your journey. It's going to be different than mine. You might be a quilter, or you might be a cook. You might be able to be a gourmet chef. If you've never tried it, I might try that next. I don't know. But my whole point is this is the journey. My journey is not over, and when they cover me over, they'll put my toolbox in them. But my toolbox is my brain. When I was very, very young, I was working for my father. A quick story. And my father was a disciplinarian. He was a mechanic, and he cleaned the tools, swept the garage, cleaned the tools. And I did it. Well, on Saturdays, he would hire an extra mechanic to help him. The guy's name was T. Model Ellison. T. Model might have had one or two, and he was helping my dad. And Dad said, get out of T. Model's way. And T. Model says, Kyle, leave that boy alone. He's learning. And something went off in my brain. This guy's pretty smart, because I wanted to learn, even at an early age, how to take things apart, how to read the book to do it and put it back together, and I did that. But again, on my artwork, if you'll just please look through it, certain ones of them are really specific to me. There's a journey that I took on a cruise ship. I call it cruise ship or senior trip. I went to Vietnam on a troop transport. So early in the morning, after 20 days on the water, this guy says, everybody up top, we've seen land. And I'm thinking it's Vietnam. And, oh no. Anyway, it was the Philippines. And it was the Philippine Islands off in a distance. Somewhere imprinted in my brain, one of these pictures, I don't know which one I put, but there's a picture of the Philippines from that ship. In my brain, it was peaceful. And that day, there were people out in dugout canoes waving at this troop ship. And there was a sense of peace there. And I want to convey that to the world. There is peace in the worst of place you can put yourself. There's still a peace that you can find. And I found my peace in my own brain, in my artwork. This one in specific is, I did this for, it's a little different. Why would somebody paint that? That is Vietnam in my mind. It's very peaceful to me to see such a country in such a turmoil, and this world is a turmoil today. And my brain says, this too shall pass. My prayers for the Ukrainian people and the children that go through that. But anyway, I thank you for your time. I know this has very little to do with storytelling, but it's my story. I share that with you and encourage you to follow your dream, especially the children that are here. Follow your dream. Believe in yourself. If you want to be a paratrooper in the airborne army, go for it. But dream big. And you're going to get skinned up. You're going to fail. Sooner or later, you're going to fail. I failed so many times, but I always got back up and came up swinging and trying harder. And that's what my art is. I hope you understand it, enjoy it, and again, thank you for your time, and thank you for the people of Pound.
Thank you, Jimmy.